Well, friends, you are joining the Teresa Lusk Show, and I am your host, Teresa Lusk. I have a law enforcement officer with me today. We are going to have an amazing conversation. I have Mike Rumfield with me. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You have an extensive law enforcement background. I am so impressed, to be honest with you, and that's why I want to leave it to you to explain to our viewers just a little bit about yourself, because today we're going to have a conversation about law enforcement and community relationships, and we're going to go into some juicy stuff like COVID and what happened with the law, the officers that had to enforce certain things, and so much more.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, great. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
I started this career at 19 years old, working in the jail. Wasn't even old enough to be a sworn officer yet.
Wow.
So I did a year at Bastrop County working in corrections, and it was an eye-opening experience for a teenager. Most teenagers are thinking about what college they're going to, and I'm dealing with inmates for a living. So it was definitely very interesting and very fun, very eye-opening, very educational, which I think laid the foundation for the entirety of my career so far. So I did that. Then I went to the Army, U.S. Army, as an infantryman with the 101st Airborne, and did that for a little bit. When I came out of the Army, I decided that I wanted to come back to Texas. But being in Bastrop, I was kind of in that stage of my life where, is it too small? Do I want something more? So I'm originally from Southern California.
Oh.
So
okay.
I'm originally an Orange County guy.
Okay.
So just to let everybody know, our airport is John Wayne Airport. Okay. I classified myself as a refugee in 2002 when I moved out here.
Okay. Goodness.
But at any rate, I tried going out there to go back into law enforcement, or essentially go into the criminal side of law enforcement away from corrections.
Okay.
And what I found was it was very difficult, let's just say that, to break into law enforcement in that environment.
Oh, okay.
So I decided to come back to Texas, and I started with the Collin County Sheriff's Office in February of 2002.
Awesome.
In the jail, working in the jail, and was a team leader eventually of a response team in the jail, promoted to sergeant after 13 months, and took over the courthouse security.
Wow. Wonderful.
So moved over into patrol operations, and in patrol operations, which is in the sheriff's office, a deputy sheriff, a patrol deputy, has the same responsibilities as a police officer on patrol, right? It's just covering different jurisdictions.
Okay.
Did that for a little over 10 years, and in that time, was a member of our Collin County SWAT team for 9.5 years.
Wow.
I was the senior team leader for the last 3. So my responsibility was to run the field operations once we were deployed, in conjunction with the SWAT commander in the command post, and train and make sure that everybody's equipment was good to go, and just overall management of the guys. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
a lot of fun.
I
it was a great privilege to lead some of the best men in law enforcement in this county on that team. The training officer was an instructor, firearms instructor, did gang intelligence as a collateral duty for 9 years, specialized in outlaw motorcycle clubs. Had a lot of fun.
Sounds like it. So you have an extensive law enforcement background.
So that was just part of it.
Oh, wow.
So then in 2015,
goodness,
I moved over to the constable's office at Precinct 4.
Okay.
And for my last 6 years there, from 2016 to 2022, I was actually the chief deputy of that office, running and managing that office.
Okay.
So I finished my career at the county with a command level position.
Wonderful.
So during that time, got my Master Peace Officer license, went to and graduated from the 55th class of ILEA School of Executive Leadership, which is a 2-month class, basically postgraduate level class for command executives or law enforcement executives. And I think in 2021, I was humbled enough to be awarded one of the Congressional Veteran Commendation Awards So yeah, it's been a fun career.
Wow, well, it's definitely extensive. And I wanted to have you on the show today because I felt like your background was extensive enough and rich enough to come and speak to the community. Because one of the things that, as I know you were probably firsthand involved in so much of this, is all the wrestling that went on with the community and with the police officers just a few years back. Some of it had to do with COVID. Some of it had to do with the abusive responses that some law officers were dealing with and that they were accused of, etc.
Sure.
And so I really want to be part of, along with you, creating something healthy for the community between the law enforcement officers and people, so that they can really understand that just because there's a few people who do something that's not healthy doesn't mean everybody's like that.
Sure.
And you deserve credit for the things that you guys do. I mean, you're keeping us safe. So what are some of the challenges that you would say at the core? What are like 2 or 3 of the greatest challenges that people believe that are not even real, between even that the media contributes? Because Mike, the media is part of the big mess.
Well, they were one of them, one of my 3. Yeah, so that's a great question and an important question. One, the media doesn't traditionally, they aren't doing either side really any great service.
That's true.
Right? They're not doing law enforcement any great service, and they're really not doing the public any great service either. Right? Somewhere along the line, I think journalism lost some of its integrity, and it was more about revenue.
Yes.
And what can we say, or what can we do, or what will bring in advertisements? And that's unfortunate, because the average citizen relies on the news for accurate information.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So I think that's one problem. I think another problem is politics in this country have gotten so extreme that we've lost sight of the fact that we're all Americans.
Yes, yeah.
I can disagree with somebody politically, but that doesn't mean I write them off.
Right. Yeah.
They're still an American.
Right.
They're still a member of our community.
That's right.
So I may not agree with you, but that doesn't mean I can't have a conversation with you.
That's right.
So I think that's another contributing factor to the deterioration in the relationship. And then, quite frankly, I think that in some jurisdictions, we've just gotten away from true community policing. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to engage in a half a dozen programs. We don't train our officers anymore to get out of the car and go talk to people.
Oh, wow.
So it's a lost art in law enforcement. Today, a lot of officers are trained or so, I guess, busy trying to drive and patrol and respond to calls. Which some jurisdictions, they're so busy, it really is almost impossible for them to have time to do that.
Okay.
But in other jurisdictions where the call load maybe is not as great, it's not something we teach anymore. And I think it is. It's something we should teach.
Oh, absolutely. Let me go back a little bit to the media part, because as you have seen, whenever there's police brutality or a story about police brutality, Mike, I get very nervous about it, because I know that the media is only showing one side of it, usually the liberal side, doesn't mean that the conservatives don't get it wrong also, but I do believe that a lot of it is pushed by liberal media mostly today in that sense. Doesn't mean that what's happening isn't true either. Like, there are some very real situations that are happening. So in trying to educate and inspire the viewers, what are some things that we can really say to them today about what they're watching? Because I've gotten to the point where even those news outlets that I would trust as a conservative, even them I have to filter through.
Right. Yeah, so that's the really difficult part is how do you fact check the people you're relying on from the information, the sources you're relying on. And listen, I've been in this business since 1997 with a break-in service in the military and whatnot. I've got 23 years of active law enforcement service, and I can say confidently that over the course of my career, I have met people in law enforcement that probably shouldn't be in law enforcement, which is probably something that every single American can say about every single profession that's out there.
Amen to that.
The difference for us is we swear an oath, and we are supposed to live a cleaner lifestyle to ensure or at least fulfill the public's trust.
That's good.
That the decisions we are making are out of good faith.
Yeah.
Right? Which qualified immunity is one of the things that people are having a problem with right now. But there's a lot of misunderstanding with qualified immunity.
Explain that real quickly.
So with qualified immunity, and I know there was some legislation trying to go through across the country this past session, and there are certain groups of people who want to abolish qualified immunity because they believe that qualified immunity is protecting bad police officers.
Okay, but it's really what?
Well, it's really the department is protecting their own in some regards, right? And I won't speak specifically to that because to each their own on how they manage their departments. And qualified immunity, however, really only remains intact if you did whatever happened under good faith.
Okay.
And you made the decisions for the right reasons.
Okay.
Okay. If you are way outside the box, that you cannot articulate good faith, it was just a blatant action on the law enforcement officer's part, that qualified immunity is gone.
Good.
So there is no more qualified immunity for you.
Yeah. Good.
So you are open to criminal charges, you're open to civil litigation. That qualified immunity is gone. Now, are the courts more forgiving with law enforcement officers in that good faith, bad faith, making good decisions for the right reasons? I would say probably they are more sympathetic due to the fact that law enforcement officers and a lot of other professions are making split-second life-deciding decisions without any timeouts. It happens very quickly, and everybody's decision-making point as a law enforcement officer is based on the information you have at that moment. Information that comes into play a week from now, 2 days from now, a month from now, after extensive research, aren't decision points that factored into that officer's decision. Okay. Right? So the courts are a little bit more lenient with that. However, there are times where even with that leniency, an officer just was way outside the box.
Sure.
And that qualified immunity should be gone in that situation. They should not be protected.
Right.
So anytime we deal with decisions like that, we have to understand that law enforcement officers are not robots. We're all humans.
Sure.
And when you bring in that human element, anything can happen.
Sure. I think it's good to explain that because people need to understand that not all police officers are out there trying to hurt other people and abuse their authority, correct?
Yeah, I would say a fraction of 1% probably fit in that category.
Sure. I mean, I think that's true of a lot. Take church life, or when you get a pastor or a priest or something that is corrupt or something, everybody takes the blame for it. But it is true. So how can the community and the officers begin to really connect again? I know you said that officers should be trained to come out of their cars, and I know that the numbers are tight right now. I know that. I mean, everywhere you go, there's a shortage of employees, and so how do you then, put that, deal with that gap? How do you do that?
Well, and somebody's got to blink first, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you have two opposing sides or perceived opposing sides, which really the community and law enforcement aren't opposing sides.
Right.
They're part of the same side. Mm-hmm. Our opposition are people who wish to victimize innocent people. Mm-hmm. That's who our opposition is. The average citizen is not opposite. We're there for you.
That's right.
So getting over maybe the fear that you've developed because you've received information from a media source that says, that puts out the narrative that law enforcement officers or dealing with law enforcement officers can be dangerous. Mm-hmm. And every community is different. Every community has its own challenges. There are communities in Collin County or in the state of Texas, probably around the country, that have a great relationship with their community. Mm-hmm. It's not every community that has the issue.
Sure.
But for the communities that do have a disconnect, a relationship by insinuation or by definition really is two parties having a conversation, exchanging ideas, growing together. Right? So it can't just be one-sided. Mm-hmm. So law enforcement obviously has to reach out.
Yeah.
But that olive branch has got to be accepted.
Correct. Yeah.
So until a community is ready to accept that olive branch, it's very, very difficult for law enforcement to bridge that gap.
Sure.
Right? So that's why you see a lot of community-oriented programs come out to try to get that olive branch to be accepted.
That's good.
Coffee with a Cop is another prime example.
I saw that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a tried and true example of, hey, just come have coffee with us.
What's the turnout like there? Because this is a point where you're making. You have to accept the olive branch. So what have you seen as far as the response?
Yeah. So coffee with the Cops, depending on the community you're in, can be very low turnout, or it can be a fairly healthy turnout. Okay. I think in the more challenging communities where the relationship's not as great, obviously that's where you're going to see your lower turnout, which is unfortunate because those communities are the ones who need that the most.
Right.
So I think using religious leaders, using community leaders, using people outside of the law enforcement community to help bridge that gap and develop that relationship is extremely important.
Okay, you just brought something up that just made my heart just go, woo, yes. How though? Okay, so how do you get, because I know a lot of people in the faith community, so how do you get these pastors and community leaders to bridge that gap? What can they do? What does that look like?
So maybe doing a joint meet and greet in their house, right? So you're not coming to the police department. You're not coming to a coffee shop. Maybe it's hosted at the church. Someplace that's familiar, someplace that the community feels safe.
That's good.
Right? And that we can start that conversation there. And we can start rebuilding that relationship there.
Okay.
And then see what happens.
Wow.
So it's, and conversely, if it's another community leader, wherever they operate out of, someplace that's in their community, we are coming to them and saying, we want to improve our relationship.
That's good. Is that something that these police departments really work with you on? Because, I mean, can I just pick up the phone and call my city police department and say, hey, I'd like to coordinate a meet and greet and get some officers? I mean, is that even, how easy
Absolutely.
is it?
It's literally that easy.
Really?
It is literally that easy.
All right. My viewers, you're listening to this. I want to encourage those of you who are watching right now to really hear what Officer Mike is saying, because this is very important. We need to be part of bringing healing to our nation. And every one step that we can take, Mike, I think is important. So if you are able, I think this is some of the greatest information that I've heard in a while. Well, it excites me. I think that especially those of you who are leaders, spiritual leaders, pastors, y'all who are in my circle, it's important to get out there and do something. It doesn't have to be the police department from my city, but definitely yours. And maybe you're not a pastor. Maybe you're just running some kind of, what about businesses, private businesses? Can they?
Anybody can.
Look at there.
So depending on the size of the agency, they may have a public relations or a public information officer already assigned.
Wonderful.
I know many of the agencies around Collin County, the larger agencies, they'll direct you to the public information officer or the public relations officer. In smaller areas, it may be the chief of police that you're dealing with. So I will say that I have never been associated with or seen a law enforcement agency that doesn't want a solid relationship with their community. It's vital.
Okay.
It's vital. You can't, the police department cannot survive on its own, and the community can't survive on its own.
That's true.
We have to work together to be prosperous and to be safe and to make sure that you feel good about where you live, you feel safe where you live, and then the economy can grow where you live.
That's good. That's good. When you've seen stories of a police officer that really did cross the line, can you speak from a police officer perspective of what it looks like from your side? Because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's assumptions that maybe all the officers are okay with that kind of behavior, but an honest officer would feel what? Talk to us about that. Anger.
We'd feel the same thing that you feel.
Okay.
Just because they are a law enforcement officer. If you have a situation where they truly did something bad, especially if it cost somebody their life, we feel the same anger you feel. We feel the same frustrations you feel.
Okay.
And we know that that person just made our jobs extremely more difficult.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So that gap gets further and further every single time that happens. So it's extremely frustrating to officers who are going out and operating in good faith, want to help the community, want to connect with the community, want to protect the community. We want to have a solid relationship with the community. It frustrates us and angers us the same way. The problem is that anger and frustration that we sometimes say we're angry and frustrated too, it's not always believed on the community side. Because immediately people think you have that blue wall, right? You're just going to protect your own.
Yeah.
And in situations where a law enforcement officer didn't act improperly, but misinformation is coming out to make it appear as though they did, that's where you see us protecting each other. Because we understand that's not the narrative that actually happened.
Right.
That's the narrative you're getting from the media.
Right.
And trying to create an issue that's really not there. That's where you see that protection.
So thank you for sharing that, because I think my viewers, and maybe you've had a family member who went through some kind of police brutality. You need to know it's not fair to label everybody as evil or unhelpful just because somebody who had bad intentions or just they don't belong in the police department or any kind of law. But this must also be scary. So, it's heartbreaking for those who've had a situation. So, my heart goes out to people who've actually been victims of that. Also, equally as important though, are the innocent police officers who do become then victimized by violence because of one person or whatever, however many of that event. What is it like when something like this happens? Let's say it's Tuesday, the crazy event happens. What does a police officer experience on Wednesday when he or she has to leave their home and all hell is breaking loose against them because of one bad apple?
Yeah, so one, it puts an enormous amount of stress and strain on that officer's family, right? Because the reality is, and I don't want to over dramatize it, but the reality is every time we do go in uniform and we say goodbye to our families, even on a normal day, we don't know if it's the last time we're going to do that.
It's terrible. Oh my gosh.
And I know that same thing can be true for anybody that goes to work and might get into a car crash, right?
But the likelihood of yours is...
But the likelihood of somebody trying to actively hurt us, trying to shoot at us, we may get into a car crash. We really don't know from day to day, are we going to come back to be able to say goodbye tomorrow? When events like this happen, and it stirs a lot of public emotion, and that emotion is vented through protesting, which, by the way, I will say I support protesting 100%. It's part of your constitutional rights as an American citizen.
Yeah.
It's not our job as a law enforcement officer or agency to suppress your right. It's our job to facilitate a safe environment for you to project your right.
That's good.
So sometimes there's some misconceptions when we are dealing with protesters, that especially when clashes between law enforcement and protesters do occur, it's not because of the protest. It's because somebody within the protest has turned violent.
Unruly behavior.
Right. And once you have more than 7 people involved in that unruly behavior, technically it becomes a riot.
Oh, goodness.
So now it becomes a situation where not only is it dangerous for law enforcement officers trying to facilitate a safe environment for people to protest and to vent and get their frustrations at whether or not it's accurate information they received that caused the anger. To them it is.
Sure.
Right? It's a genuine emotion from them.
Yeah.
And it's our job to facilitate a safe environment for them to project that.
That's good.
And hopefully we have a good relationship that we can go back behind that and say, listen, what you initially got upset about didn't really happen. But that's not going to prevent protesters from coming out initially.
Sure.
But we have to react to that violence within that protest to keep the protesters safe as well that aren't there to commit violence. Right? And so but of course, when you see the media, when you see people who maybe have an agenda, they're going to report it that law enforcement was overly aggressive with peaceful protesters. I can't tell you how many times through 2021 we heard the media report on peaceful protesters, and
they were lighting fires.
Look at downtown Dallas; it was destroyed. I mean, I don't know how
fires,
all of that happened when everybody was peaceful.
Oh, I saw it. I saw that.
It's I mean, come on, when you your eyes are not going to lie to you,
right? Yeah.
So that was very frustrating to deal with and to listen. And I didn't even have to go to Dallas, but I've got a lot of Dallas friends.
Sure.
And listening to them and their stories, it was amazing.
Oh, it was all real. I have a daughter who actually got stuck in downtown, and something happened to her, and I'm not going to get into it, but it was very upsetting because I thought this is what we call protesting is really harassment, and it's dangerous for the community. It's dangerous for a young girl driving in her car trying to get to work. Right,
and that's what we are trying to prevent. We're trying to prevent those issues from just spiraling out of control. As you remember back in 2016, when Dallas, unfortunately, we lost 5 officers that night. That was an anti-law enforcement protest. Those
and
officers,
had officers there, huh?
They were covering downtown to make sure that they had a safe environment to protest them. Yeah. So, if it wasn't for an outside person who had a very, very violent agenda and wreaked havoc that night, Dallas would have successfully accomplished the mission of providing an environment for their citizens to protest against them. With no actions.
Yeah. This is really a complex situation because I think no matter how much truth comes forth, people respond in emotion.
Right.
And I mean, as a mom, I can imagine if something happened to my child and there was a police officer involved or any other kind of event, you project your anger to that person regardless of who and what, right? So we get very emotional. Although I will say that as I sit here with our law officer here, I think it's so important, my friends, that we really understand how important it is to find details first, the true details, not what the media says. I can take a snippet of any show I've done and let you hear whatever you might want to hear, make you happy. But it doesn't work that way. And so I think it's very important, which kind of leads me to the next point. And this one's a big one. They're all big, but this is also really important because during COVID, there was so much chaos and havoc going on because of the mask mandates. So it was, as you were sharing a story with us earlier about, if a private business owner wants masks, and there's a consumer who comes in and they don't want to. What happened? Give us an idea of what happened in that situation where we may have thought police officers were actually enforcing mask mandates, but that was not true.
Right. Well, and I won't speak for every community in the country because there are some areas where I don't even know if that's a true statement.
Okay, but at least for our area.
But for here in North Texas, I will say that there was a little bit of a misconception on those situations. Law enforcement was not, well, first of all, let's just say that every private business has a right to refuse service for anything that's not a federally protected class.
Okay.
Right? So everybody has seen the no shirt, no shoes, no service signs, right? Those used to be hugely popular. During COVID, masks kind of got lumped into that, right? Now, whether that was because of a local politician made an executive order that required it, and whatever the case may be, however that became a reality, whether or not the business owner truly wanted it themselves, or if they felt they had to implement that, which kind of goes down another rabbit hole.
I was going to say, yeah.
Probably shouldn't go down, but however that became about, if that business owner has made the decision that they are going to require a mask, a shirt, shoes, anything to serve you, that's their right as a private business owner. I don't have to agree with it, but that's their right.
Okay.
When somebody comes onto their private property and that owner has said, we're not going to do commerce with you, you need to leave my property, and they don't, well, then we do get into an actual legal issue. So law enforcement is not responding to enforce the mask.
Okay.
Law enforcement is responding because a property owner is telling us now that somebody is trespassing. And criminal trespass is a violation of law. So when you saw officers going and telling people they had to leave because the property owner didn't want them there and it was over a masking issue, I understand the misconception that they were enforcing the mask mandate. But in reality, we were enforcing, or they, whoever had to do that. Luckily, I never had to do that, so I was never in that position. But unfortunately, officers were in a position where we still have to enforce the law. Whether or not we want to or not, sometimes is a completely different conversation. I can almost promise you those officers probably did not want to have to remove that person because a property owner was refusing service and they were, by the definition of law, committing criminal trespass. But we still have to execute our duties.
I'm so glad you're clearing that up because I think that there's probably a lot of misconception again. Probably not even just in this area. I mean, I'm pretty certain this is across the nation, right?
I would assume, yes.
Yeah, because you do have to enforce that part of the law. And very interesting because we're, told by the media mostly that you as an officer are enforcing the mask mandates.
Right.
But that's not it.
Yeah, at least in this area. Now, for the stories, that came out where people were walking down the road and they didn't have a mask and they're stopped by law enforcement, listen, I've got no excuse for that.
Yeah.
I've got no defense to that. That shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
From a law enforcement officer's perspective.
Good.
That shouldn't have happened. Matter of fact, I I specifically stopped a group of teenagers walking down the road in Frisco back then who had masks on. And I stopped and was like, hey, you're outside. You're walking. You don't have to have a mask on if you don't want to. And they looked at me like I don't.
Wow.
And I said, no, man.
Wow.
Dude, what do you? No, you can just breathe. And they took them off and walked down the road.
God, they're like, finally.
So, right. They thought that they had to wear a mask everywhere they were. And it was a beautiful day. And I don't even know how they were breathing, playing around on the sidewalk, walking down the road. No, breathe, enjoy.
Mike, don't even get me started about the people who wear their masks in the car, because y'all are going to hate me after that one. But listen, I'm with you. I was like completely, please don't force that mask on me. So you are running for constable for Precinct 4.
I am.
And I asked you earlier why, because, we all do things. There's different motives to why people run, why they want to be in office. But I really appreciated your response. I meet a lot of people. I think people they love the idea of being political, etc. But talk to us a little bit about why you are running for this position.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. Long short of it, I just believe that we are in a time in our country, and specifically in Texas, where we just need strong leadership. We need strong, effective leadership that has the intestinal fortitude to ensure that the right thing is happening, right? Because sometimes doing the right thing is not always, matter of fact, it's usually the harder thing to do.
Say it again.
But you have to have the intestinal fortitude as a law enforcement leader to understand you're going to have to make those tough decisions and have the ability to do it. And after the fact, stand by it.
There you go.
Right? And defend it.
Yes.
And explain, this is why I made the decision that I made. I think that based on my years of experience, based on where I came from and what I've seen in the community and my intense desire to bridge that gap, I think that I'm the best candidate for that particular office right now. We have a lot of other law enforcement leaders in this county that are strong, that have the same ideology, that have the same goals, and I'm simply asking for the opportunity to assume that office and help with that mission.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you said not just make an important decision, but stick with it, because in the times that we are in, there is so much pressure from culture, society, things that want you to bend to what is the emotion that I'm feeling versus what is best for our country, for our area, your county, your city, etc. I think that is something that we need in our area right now, somebody who's willing to stick with the decision that is lawful, really.
Right. Well, and that's a very important word. It has to be lawful.
Yeah.
Right. If you make an unlawful decision and you stick to it, well, that just speaks to your character.
Oof. Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It has to be lawful. And listen, again, even police leaders are human.
That's right.
They don't always make the right decision initially, based on the information they have. But a good leader, when they receive additional information, will either adjust that decision as needed, or if it was the proper decision to begin with, will stick to it and not bend to politics or emotion, as you stated, or an influence group that is in the minority but just very loud.
Let me ask you this. Are politics playing a part in the way which officers make decisions today?
I think that politics are influencing command staffs. I don't know that the street level officer is making their decisions based on politics.
Okay.
Most officers are young or younger and quite frankly aren't very politically involved, right? So they don't have that background or perspective or bias or agenda to make those decisions based on politics.
Okay.
However, command staff is more influenced by politics. which will then influence their policies and procedures and directives, which then will change the behavior of the officer.
Which we've seen in some cities already happening, yes, and
right.
which is why their cities are falling apart.
Right.
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 Okay. Wow. What are some things that you would like to leave with our community, our viewers? And then I want you to tell us just a little bit about the organization that you and your wife founded. But, I think our community needs to hear some things. I would love for you to tell them, what do officers really want us to know? And what do you want the community to know?
Well, first and foremost, most officers out there want the community to know and want you personally to know. Don't be afraid of us.
Okay.
We're there for you.
Okay.
We are not there to harass you. I know you feel that when you get pulled over, but that's just a minor hiccup in the day.
Sure.
But we are genuinely there for the community.
Mm-hmm.
We take the risks that we do for you.
Okay.
Don't be afraid of us.
Okay.
Now, conversely, if you're a member of our community that wishes to do harm to somebody in our community, you better be afraid of us.
There you go.
But if you are an innocent person just looking to live their life and get along with their neighbors and go to work and live a clean life, we're there for you.
There you go. So
please don't tell your kids to be afraid of us by saying we're going to arrest you in the grocery store. We are literally there on your behalf. And then I'm sorry, I got on a tangent there. So what was the second part of that?
Well, but you're kind of bringing me to another point that I want to ask real quick. What do you say to people that have been harmed by a police officer who wasn't being honorable?
Oh, wow, you dropped one on me on that one.
I'm sorry. But you're a police officer.
Yeah,
not that you're committing the crime, but...
No, how do you find the words to... How do you find the words to help them, right? Because that's a very difficult position to be in as a law enforcement officer, because you are wearing the same uniform, take the same oath as the person who did this criminal act against a member of our community. That's a very difficult conversation to have. And I'm not even sure what words that person would accept, right? Because once you take away that veil of protection and comfort, and that has been violated, how do you restore that in that person? We probably could make efforts to restore it in the community, but speaking to that person individually, how do you make that right? And that's
hard.
It's extremely difficult.
Well, I can tell you that coming from the church world, ministry world, there are a lot of people who have complained about spiritual leaders who have abused their position, and I can't restore that faith in the ministers, but I can say, I'm sorry that you went through that. I'm sorry that hurt you. I'm sorry that person really surrendered their mandate to something that wasn't good. But also, and I just pray that you heal, because what else can you say to somebody, right?
Yeah, outside of an apology.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't know, and I can be a talker.
Sure.
I don't even know if I could come up with the words that could actually fix and mend, right? And I think that you do have to fall on your faith and the power of forgiveness, and just lean on your faith in your recovery and recovery from that violation.
Yeah, that's good. But I think you're bringing up a good point, because you're being very honest and saying, this is such a big deal. I can't tell you anything that would lead you into that place of forgiveness. You will have to grab onto your faith and strengthen yourself and be able to walk through that process. So, thank you for being honest and, vulnerable, because I know that that's hard because you're on this side and this side. Like you have to be on both sides.
Right.
But the pain is real for both. And I try to always consider that. There's two sides, and the pain is real for both.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your foundation.
So Leilani, my wife, and I, we founded America's Defenders Foundation in 2016. And again, it was something that was born, unfortunately, out of tragedy in our law enforcement community. So Deputy Goforth out of Harris County was murdered at a gas station. And I drove down and participated in the funeral with thousands of other law enforcement officers. But it was the drive back that I was talking to Leilani on the phone, and I saw an intense amount of camaraderie and support in the Houston area for the law enforcement family down there. And having been involved in law enforcement for a long time in North Texas up to that point, we weren't on the same level in supporting one another. So through that conversation, we decided to pursue starting an organization that would help facilitate that and help give some of that support back.
Good.
So America's Defenders Foundation was born. My son actually named it and helped me with the logo. He was very intent on that.
Good for him.
So essentially what our mission is, in a nutshell, is supporting law enforcement families and veteran families through various programs that we have. So the largest that we have is the Thin Blue Line Ball. It's actually held right over at the Marriott, right across the way.
Okay.
And we do that every April. April 6th is the next ball. We have hundreds of law enforcement officers coming in from usually 5 to 7, maybe 8 states that are represented. Throughout the year, we have Children of the Blue Line, Children of the Green Line. So we're very careful not to get into a therapeutic niche, right? Because there's lots of other organizations that are very good with that and have already filled that niche for them. We have programs to supplement that niche, right? So our idea is, while those organizations don't have money for fun, we don't want to get into therapeutic.
That's right.
So we'll supplement it by doing the fun.
There you go.
So we'll get tickets or a suite to a football game, to baseball games, to hockey games, medieval times, maybe holiday in the park at Six Flags, and bring out law enforcement families, bring out veteran families, and get those children, because the reality is because of the lifestyles that we either live now or did as a veteran, and some of the things that those guys saw in different parts of the world, it changes their perspective, right? So the children experience different things, or maybe more restricted, maybe aren't quite as free to just kind of go out and do whatever. Maybe create some hardship in the family, and so tensions in the family, which I know my kids have been restricted compared to a lot of other people's families. But the idea is to get them together, get them to coordinate, and organically create a network that they can support one another with.
Awesome.
So we do have a service, a companion dog program as well, and that's as one is sponsored, we will train. So we have lots of different programs that we do throughout the year.
That's wonderful. How can they find more information on that?
So you can go to americasdefenders.org or thetblb.com for the ball.
Awesome. Well, there you have it. You're doing a great job. Thank you so much for what you're doing. Thank you for sacrificing your life and for the safety of others and for myself and those in my community.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
All your partners who also do the same thing. I mean, I'm very, very grateful for police officers. I haven't always had the best experiences either, but I know that the majority of police officers really are out there to help. And
they are.
I saw, I'm going to be a little trashy here just for a second.
Okay.
There's I think it's Senator Kennedy. He said it was like a reel that was put out there, and it said, the next time something's happening to you, like it was some kind of crime, he says, call a crackhead, don't call a police officer. And I know that sounds terrible, but he made his point, right? Like if you become so anti-police officer, the next time you're in trouble, what do you do?
Right.
So, yeah. So thank you for everything you do.
No, and, thank you for having me.
Blessings on the run as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. We're going to do everything we can to be successful with it, and we'll just talk to the community.
There you go.
And let the community know who I am, and if they feel fitting enough to put me in office, then I will humbly accept and do everything I can to fulfill their expectations.
There you go. And that'd be wonderful. Actually, I think that'd be great because you're also building relationships with them on behalf of the police force. Right. So I think that's wonderful.
Right.
There you have it, my friends. This was Mike Rumfield. And where can they find you? Can they find you?
So
outside of your
campaign side? Oh, yeah. So
whatever you want to share that you would like for them to reach out.
So the website is Rumfield 4 Constable, the number 4 Constable.com. And I've got all the information, resume, bio, experience, all of that for you to research there. Social media is still coming.
Okay.
The team is I had a call right before this actually on that fact. So that's still coming. That should come later this week.
All right.
But yeah, other than that, find me on social media under Mike Rumfield.
There you go. Well, you have plenty of places to find him. My friends, thank you so very much. Take everything he said to heart today. Be proactive. Build some community relationships with your police officers. Let them know how thankful you are. And for those who have suffered with police brutality or something, let them know how sorry you are and help them rebuild their confidence in our police force. May God richly bless you.